Kevin Wilson Jr., director of the Napkin Playbook. Now, I see the X on your hat. That's old school Spike.
Oh, yeah.
As a director, is he an influence of yours?
Big one, big influence. His film "Do the Right Thing" is the film that made me want to be a filmmaker. He's the reason why I wanted to go to NYU. When I got to NYU, he became my mentor. And so I am definitely a student of Spike, for sure.
Now, a student of Spike who's Oscar nominated and bringing a documentary here to the African American Film Festival on Martha's Vineyard. Talk to us about the Napkin Playbook.
Well, the story came to me through Ben Proudfoot, who owns Brickwater Studios. He called me up one night. We'd done 2 projects together previously, and he says, "I've got a story for you." And we just started talking about Clarence Kaiser and Akron, Ohio, and McDonald's, and the role that they played together in changing the lives of young people in that community. And for me, you know, I grew up in the Black community in Durham, North Carolina, and I had my own Clarence Kaiser. You know, his name was Wendell Tabb, and he ran a theater program in Durham where he took, you know, the school was in the middle of the hood, and he took us to Kenya and London, and he's taking students to Brazil and China. And he's, in doing so, saved the lives of so many young folks who were at risk of going in another direction. And so I connected with Mr. Kaiser's story for that reason. It became very personal for me, and I wanted to do what I could as a filmmaker to help bring that story to the world.
As a filmmaker who's making documentaries, you have your own personal vision. How much of your personal vision maybe runs perpendicular to
Right.
what the actual story will, the story that you're telling?
Well, I like to stay out of the way, you know, as a filmmaker. I feel, you know, too many times I see films where you can feel the director's hand on the story. And particularly with documentaries, I think, you know, sometimes it serves the film well, and other times I don't think it serves it well at all, because we don't really find our way to the true heart of the story. And then so in this particular case, I wanted to get into the community, so I showed up in Akron before the rest of the crew did, before the producers did. It was just me and Mr. Kaiser, and just me and Mike Bickley, just hanging out in the community with no intention of like turning the camera on, but just spending time with them, you know. And so for me, that helped me get to the heart of the story. It helped me find what the story wanted to be, and I just stayed out of the way and let Mr. Kaiser be the storyteller that he is.
Staying out of the way, great for you, but when you work for an organization like McDonald's that is omnipresent, like there is nowhere in the world that they don't know the Golden Arches, was there ever any McDonald's wants this, I want that, or was it a partnership that basically was, etched in gold?
No, it was a great partnership. I think, you know, the story itself, you know, just highlighted McDonald's presence within that community. They were already there, you know what I mean? And so when we were telling the story, you know, we were both pursuing the same goal. We were both after the same thing, because just the story demanded it, you know what I mean? The story, you know, what Mr. Kaiser and his partners did, you know, it started at that McDonald's, you know, and for me to come in and kind of impose a different vision onto it would be taking away from the actual story and the beauty of the actual story. So I have been in that situation as a filmmaker on other projects where it wasn't necessarily a brand, but, you know, a studio where like I want to tell this version of the story and they want to tell a different version of the story. But from the very beginning, you know, with the Napkin Playbook and with Clarence Kaiser, we were all in pursuit of the same goal. So, you know, from the beginning till now, you know, it's been a beautiful, beautiful process, and we've all been kind of on the journey together.
How important do you feel documentaries are in the Black community being told by Black storytellers as opposed to fiction and the cinema where it's to entertain? Documentaries are kind of rooted in this information. So how important do you feel it is that Black storytellers really do these documentaries more so than just the acting?
Oh, that's a great question, because I've seen the result of that before where, you know, there's a story about, you know, someone in the Black community, and you can tell that the story was told by someone who wasn't really comfortable with being in that community. And the first part is just because, you know, when we as filmmakers show up, you know, a lot of times we, you know, if we're not like genuine about wanting to tell the real story and really connect genuinely with the characters, you know, we can have our ideas and then we show it with the camera. We just tell people what we want them to do. And I find that when that happens, people kind of pull back a little bit. You know, there's a veil between, you know, the filmmaker and the character. There's a veil between like the filmmaker and the community. And what happens is when the film comes out, it feels like it's just being told from the perspective of an observer, as opposed to the perspective of someone who was like invited into that community, invited into, you know, the spirit of those people. And so for me, it's important that Black filmmakers remain the arbiters of their stories, because they, you know, one, they're going to understand, you know, what the story is beyond the headline, right? Beyond just, oh, there's a story about people, you know, who grew up in the hood and they, you know, people were killed and there's drugs and there's violence and there's gangs. But what is the story beyond that? Like, who are the people beyond those headlines that we see in the news all the time? I feel like it takes a very specific person who's in tune with the culture to look beyond what that headline is and really find their way to the heart of the human being, you know?
Spike, your mentor, is known for specific shots in his films.
Yes.
When Kevin puts his stamp on a film, how do we know it's yours? Like what? We know a Spike Lee joint.
Yeah.
How do we know your film?
You know, I think I'm still developing that voice, you know, and it might be for someone else to look at and say, you know, that is a Kevin Wilson. I mean, when we're in screenings, you know, Breakwater, they say, "Oh, get your tissues ready." I'm known for, you know,
making us cry.
telling emotional stories.
Okay.
But that's not anything that I'm doing intentionally. For me, I try to let my heart lead. And so I don't necessarily always know exactly what I'm doing. I think there is a thread. There's like a heartfelt thread, a spiritual thread throughout all of my movies. But it's nothing that I'm like thinking about beforehand. I'm just kind of, you know, finding a subject, finding a story, and trying to genuinely connect with them as human beings. I try not to accept projects that, you know, where I don't connect with someone at the heart level. And so I think because of who I am, there is that thread throughout all the work that I do, but I haven't quite been able to identify it yet.
Kevin Wilson Jr. from Durham, North Carolina to NYC, to New York Film School. What would you tell young filmmakers who say, I want to do that. I want to be that I want to be that Black person telling stories of my community. What would you impart to them?
I would say you have to get out and do it. You know, for me, when I was in North Carolina, I didn't wait till I got to NYU to start making things. You know, I was making stuff at 17 years old. When I was in Durham, there was a documentary program for teenagers at the Duke's. It's called the Duke Center for Documentary Studies, and they had a camp for young students of color, 14, 15 years old, and we were going around on the city bus with a film camera and with a tape recorder and taking photos and interviewing people and installing those that photography in the panels of the windows of the city buses, you know, for people to come and like see what the community was talking about. And so it started there for me, you know, just getting out and finding stories and just making things, whether it be with a film camera or with, you know, your phone, a tape recorder. Just get out into the community and make stuff and figure out what it is that you want to say and be about the business of saying it.
Oscar-nominated filmmaker Kevin Wilson Jr. We got to say thank you to Spike, because if X marks the spot,
yes, sir,
you right here, right now, and you're next. Thank you so much
brother.
for joining us.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.